Oh.
Think horse racing is too complicated? Think again.
And they're off!
Every pro was a newbie once. Meet DRF Newbie, the mobile tool loaded with daily racing form data and the power of DRF AI.
What a shocker!
Get the insights you need fast so you can play smarter and feel more confident. DRF Newbie, horse racing made simple. Try it free today. Visit newbie.drf.com.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Daily Racing Form Breeders' Cup live handicapping show presented by Morning Line IO. It's like the night before Christmas for all of us horse players here. I'm Gino Buccola alongside Brad Free and David Aragona, and we'll be talking to you about Breeders' Cup Friday and Saturday coming up. Brad, I know you've been out at the track the last week or so plus. How's everything been going on your end, and what's the vibe been like leading into Breeders' Cup Friday?
Well, the vibe in Breeders' Cup week is always, it's electric. I mean, everybody's kind of on pins and needles, the horsemen hoping that their horses get to the starting gate. We saw one key scratch already this week with Sovereignty out of the Classic. But everybody's just looking forward to putting their horses in the starting gate and finding out who is the best horse among these 14 races. It's exciting. Everybody's pumped, and we're ready to rock and roll.
David, we have everybody filtering in, and we're going to be fielding comments from everyone, questions. You're going to pull up the Daily Racing Form past performances. I think I've seen about 375 previews from you over the last couple of days individually. How's everything going on your end as we get ready for the big 2 days?
Yeah, I think I had a marathon 4-hour recording session with Mike yesterday. So all that content's up on the YouTube channel now. You can peruse it when you get a chance. But no, looking forward to the big weekend ahead. Obviously, a lot of preparation early in the week and the weeks before, getting the field set, setting the morning lines. But now most of the work is done. We just get to have these conversations, debates about who we want to bet in these races and watch the great racing action this weekend.
What we'll do is we'll pull up the Daily Racing Form past performances. We're going to start on Breeders' Cup Friday. We're going to look at the Breeders' Cup races. We're going to quickly go through Friday, share a couple of our opinions on the Friday card. We'll spend a little more time on Saturday, in particular some of the bigger races in the middle of the Saturday Breeders' Cup card. So let's start things out, and we're going to also be fielding some of your comments. We'd love to hear from you out there, and we'll say hello to anyone checking in, all the folks out there who are getting ready for the Breeders' Cup. So we already had questions coming in about Lenny Lou, one of the horses that we'll talk about actually in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint. So we can start right there. And David, let's talk about Lenny Lou as we pull this one up. That's a question that is pertinent to the first Breeders' Cup race. What do you think about Lenny Lou's chances in race number 6, and then get into telling us anyone that you may like in the juvenile turf sprint.
Yeah, I think Lenny Lou brings up a discussion point that's going to be recurring on Friday about horses that were considered some of the top players in these races that didn't draw ideal post positions when they were announced on Monday night at the draw. She's one that I think was on a lot of people's short list as being one of the strongest contenders in this juvenile turf sprint. And I mean, Brad, you can elaborate on this, but the 12 post going 5 furlongs on the turf at Del Mar seems like it could be pretty detrimental because you want to save ground in these races.
Well, especially 5/8 at Del Mar, because you need to have a ground saving trip. At some point on the turn, you got to drop in. I've seen so many horses over the years caught 3 and 4 wide, and they completely flatten out in the stretch. So Lenny Lou is one of those horses that is at risk of being caught wide from post number 12. It's not a good spot to start from. And when the ability level is so closely matched, you cannot concede those advantage, or in the case of Lenny Lou, it's her disadvantage. So it's a tough post.
David, any strong opinion in this race? Anyone you want to hit on and mention?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go through some of our interesting horses that we like on Friday that we're looking forward to betting. One of those for me is the number 3, Royal Testament. She is one of 2 George Weaver horses in here, and I think she's going to be the bigger price of the 2 because I see his other horse, Sci-Fair, attracting a lot of support from handicappers in the lead up to this race, and with good reason. I think Sci-Fair is a contender. But Royal Testament, she's flying under the radar a little bit. I thought she was pretty impressive winning that Rosie Stakes against the boys at Colonial this summer. She tried the 6 furlongs last time in the Matron, and I didn't love the trip that she got because that was a race dominated by rail runners, and she was 2 to 3 wide most of the way. And let's face it, doesn't hurt to get this jockey upgrade to Flavien Prat for the race. And hitting on what Brad was bringing up, you do want to save ground, probably have some forward position on this turf course, and it seems like Flavien's going to be able to get her into the right spot from this post.
Any other thoughts on the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, Brad?
Yeah, I mean, I like True Love. I mean, that's my top selection, but this is one of those situations where I don't mind betting my second preference. First of all, True Love is very, very good. And she's also very, very obvious. She's a Group 1 winner from overseas. European imports have had increasing success in the juvenile turf sprint the last few years. And so she's the most qualified European shipper coming in. But there's another European shipper coming in that has some credentials as well. He's down on the inside, number 1, Brussels, whose price is double that of True Love, 8 to 1 on number 1, Brussels. Runner-up last time out in a Group 3, runner-up 2 starts back in a Group 1, trained by Aidan O'Brien. He also starts True Love. I think that Brussels does have a forwardly placed running style. He can get a little keen down inside, waiting for room, but his last 2 starts I thought were very, very good. If there is a big price discrepancy, I'm going to forsake True Love and take my second selection, number 1, Brussels.
Had a couple people asking about where you can watch. I think this weekend they've set it up so everything will be on Peacock if you have Peacock, and I think FanDuel will also have all of the races too on FanDuel TV. So they're going to make it real easy for everybody. Then of course the big ones will be on NBC, but if you have Peacock, you can just watch them all the way through. One horse I want to mention before we move on was funny because this horse was really highly regarded early on in the career on the dirt, and that was Obliteration, who wins the first 2 races by 7 and 10, big speed figures in doing so. And then it's been a little bit disappointing in the last few races with 3 consecutive seconds, but for the first time, he might actually be bettable in this race. He will be a big price and he will be a fair price. I think cutting back, he might be able to get forward, have a little bit of punch. I could see him in the mix and maybe a horse I'm going to use in some tries at what could be a very fair price. I haven't heard many people talking about him. I think he's kind of being discounted there. So get things started in the juvenile turf sprint. That's going to be race number 6 on Friday. And as we turn the page to race number 7, the juvenile fillies, I cheated a little bit on the test here, Brad. I watched your video where you were talking about some of the horses that you may like, some of the price horses and some of the vulnerable favorites. And I think you had a pretty strong opinion in race number 7, the Breeders' Cup juvenile fillies, and a horse that's a fair price that I think you liked a little bit here.
Well, I mean, I picked the favorite, number 7, Explorer. I thought her win in the Oakleaf Stakes was dominating. She took blinkers off. She relaxed. She settled. She finished. She kicked. She did everything that you want to see a filly do going into this Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. However, there was another horse that raced at Santa Anita last time out by the name of Super Corridora, who stretched out for the first time. She's a daughter of Gunrunner. Her first 2 starts were kind of even-paced sprints. Then they stretched her out, and she crushed the field. Super Corridora, daughter of Gunrunner, lightly raced. She clearly relished the 2-turn distance. We don't know where she fits on the class ladder, but we do know this. She is getting better, and she's listed at a fat 15 to 1. So Explorer is going to be tough to beat. But Super Corridora, the way that she won that maiden race suggests to me that she might be a graded stakes caliber filly. I know her connections think so as well. And when you watch this filly run through the stretch, she's not all out. She wins with something left. It was her first route. I think she has nothing but upside. She's going to have to make a forward move to defeat Explora. I think that California has this race in a bag with number 7 Explora, number 8 Super Corridor, and even number 9 Lowally with a huge jockey switch to Flavian Pratt after 2 compromising trips. So 7, 8, 9 for me in the juvenile fillies.
I'm very much with you in thinking that in this race, the West Coast fillies are the stronger group of fillies. And David, I believe you had one of the West Coast fillies as your top selection in here too, right?
Yeah, I guess the West Coast bias is contagious in this race because
I love
even the
it.
East
West
Coast
Coast, Best Coast.
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically on the exact same page as Brad in this race. I agree, Explorer is the horse to beat, but I think the interesting price is Super Corridora for all the reasons that Brad laid out. And furthermore, I watched her last workout. You could find tape of it on First TV, and she just strikes me as a horse that has really turned the corner since the summer. Added distance is working for her. So you could see the trip note that I added in Formulator. She's a horse that I just thought showed off a really nice turn of foot, winning in that race last time. So, she's got to prove it against Stakes Company, but I don't think any of the East Coasters are coming out of the strongest stakes races that we've seen in this division. So I believe she's interesting too.
I just want to mention a horse that Brad briefly mentioned. Lowally is a horse who I've been following along with from that career debut. And I think she'll be a fair price because she's a little light on speed figures. But if you watch her races visually, she is impressive. She's very good in the mornings too. If you watch her workouts, she's just a talented horse who might be a little bit better than she looks on paper. And in her 2 races where she faced Graded Stakes Company, she's just not as quick as some of those other fillies earlier. And she got compromised trips. She was kind of down on the inside both times. She had to wait for others to make their move and move late. And if this race does heat up, let's say Super Corridora goes, let's say Explora is forward in here, and you get a horse like Iron Orchard, meaning some of them to show some speed, all of a sudden this race could set up pretty nicely for Lowally to get a little more pace in a bigger field, something she hasn't really received in her last 2 races. So she's a bit interesting, and we're all falling in on the West Coast horses here. Brad, any final thoughts on the juvenile fillies?
Well, there's a reason why we're falling on the West Coast horses. It's because the Midwest and East Coast horses were not very impressive, including the 1-2 finishers and the Alcibiades. And you can pull up Formulator, look at the video, and take a look at Tommy Joe and the other filly coming out of the Alcibiades. And from a visual perspective, this was not a strong race at all. And I wonder, how far these fillies really want to go, because coming through the lane, there's nobody's coming from behind. And these 2 fillies that are going to finish 1-2, they really don't have a lot left in the tank. Percy's Bar and Tommy Joe, they just don't look like fillies that want to run farther than they just did. They just took a big bump with each other. Tommy Joe could not get past Percy's Bar. I wonder if Tommy Joe takes after her mother, who could not get 2 turns. So I'm going to take a stand against the Alcibiades and even the Frazette winner, Iron Orchard. California for me too, guys.
We're all on the West Coast fillies in race number 7. Let's flip to the juvenile fillies turf. That's going to go as race number 8 in here. And David, one thing we saw with some of the races on Friday, we had a couple of the horses who might be heavy favorites for Aidan O'Brien draw way to the outside. That was the case here with Precise. Did that change your morning line at all and how you were going to set this horse?
It didn't change my morning line on this filly too much. I initially had her even money. I just bumped her up 1 tick to 6-5. I changed the line actually much more on Gstaad in the last race that we'll talk about. But Precise, she's a horse when you watch her races in Europe. She's not that quick away from the gate. She likes to drop back. Her strength is her finishing kick. So I don't think they were ever looking to get forward with her. And probably the best plan from an outside post like this is to just take back, try to get towards the tail end of the field and save ground from there, and then try to work out some racing luck from that position. So I don't think it changes Precise's trip that much. She is way the horse to beat in this race because let's be honest, the Americans that are in this race, they all kind of look the same. None of them have run that fast. They haven't really distinguished themselves, especially those coming out of the graded stakes prep races. So she's not catching the toughest American field for the juvenile fillies turf. And if she works out a trip, she is probably going to win.
Brad, what did you end up doing here in the juvenile fillies turf?
What David said, exactly. I think Precise is just too good. The post position number 13 is not a good post. How bad is it? Over the last 10 years, post number 13 in 1 mile grass races, 1 for 28. But among those 27 losers, I wonder how many of them were Group 1 winners coming from Europe. I dare say probably zero. This is an outstanding filly. I agree with David. She's going to tuck in. She's going to come with the run. She's the class of the field. I think she wins this race. However, and David, you might want to elaborate on this. Number 1, Ultimate Love, who won the Salima Stakes last time out. And that's the same stakes race that Sharing won a few years ago before she scored an upset in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Ultimate Love is 3 for 3. Her numbers are getting faster. She was super impressive at Laurel last time out, and she drew a very cozy post number 1 for Ultimate Love. She might be good enough to spring an upset, and if Precise, it's a wide trip or hits traffic or is compromised in some way, shape, or form. Number 1, Ultimate Love. This is a nice win by her, and she's going to be rolling in the lane. I think she has a chance to spring an upset, but I'm all over Precise with Ultimate Love, second preference.
Yeah, I actually put Ultimate Love on top in this race. I just think she's drawn much better than Precise. She's going to have a little more racing luck in all likelihood, as John Velasquez has just been riding lights out over the past few months. I don't think he's going to take the rail position away from this filly. And I'm not going to hold it against her that she's coming out of races against weaker competition, because I personally don't think that the major preps for this, like the Jessamine or the Miss Grio, were particularly strong races. So I think Ultimate Love fits with these. And Mike Trombetta, I'll pull up DRF Formulator. He is not the kind of trainer that just takes shots in graded stakes races willy-nilly. When he runs a horse in a graded stakes, they've got a chance. You could see over the past 5 years, he's got a positive $2.42 ROI in graded stakes. So I think it's meaningful that he's targeting this race with this filly.
David, I completely agree with you. I have Ultimate Love. And the other one, as a major player in here, I know you've been a fan of Time to Dream, and I have too, of this filly's just ability overall. Didn't get the smoothest of trips, or maybe the best trip last time out. Does she have a shot in here, David?
You know, I initially thought I was going to like her more in this race because I was so impressed with her races at Saratoga this summer. She showed off a really nice turn of foot to win both of those races. But the problem is, when you go back to look through some of those fields that she defeated at Saratoga, they really haven't gone on. They weren't the strongest. I think that she was flattered by the competition. And while she did have some trouble last time in the Jessamine, like I said, I didn't love that race overall. And I don't want to make so much of an excuse for her that I am going to convince myself that she'll beat a horse like Precise, even if that one works out a trip.
Don't forget, as we turn the page to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, there are a lot of the two-day wagers that you can get involved in, a lot of the two-day doubles that connect some of the similar races from Friday to Saturday. So if you want to play like the Juvenile Phillies Distaff double, and then they have one for the Juvenile going into the Classic. In the Juvenile, Brad, we have Ted Noffey, who's 3 for 3. He's been very impressive. He earned 98 and 97 Beyer speed figures in his grade 1 wins. You have Brandt, who's been the best sort of on the West Coast so far. And Brandt has been 2 for 2. He was on the lead last time out. He'll be going a little farther than we've seen. Those are the two that will take the most money in here. Do you think it's just a 2-horse race between them two, or is there anyone else on your radar here?
No, I didn't pick either one of those on top. I loved the American Pharoah victory last time out by number 1 Intrepido, who's listed at 8-1 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Intrepido stretched out at Del Mar this summer, broke his maiden with a very soft, comfortable trip, pressing the pace. But in the American Pharoah, a lot of things went wrong with this horse. He did not get that same good trip. He's inside in traffic. I think he's 2 off the fence. And for a brief moment on the far turn, it looked like he was going to be shuffled out and not finish anywhere. But when Hector Berrios was able to work Intrepido to the outside and get him in the clear, and when he cracked him up with the left-handed whip at about the 8th pole, Intrepido absolutely took off. He overcame adversity in this race. He can come from behind. He can press the pace if necessary. Nothing bothers this horse. Trainer Jeff Mullen said he doesn't give a blankety blank, and he meant that as a compliment. This horse will run through a brick wall for you. Look at him take off late on the outside, Intrepido. I think Intrepido can spring an upset over Ned Toffey and Ted Noffey, and also Grant. Those two actually could hook up. Look, I know that Ted Noffey's been impressive in his last 2 starts. I don't know if he's ever seen the type of speed that Brandt is going to dish out. And those are the 2 fastest horses in the race with the 2 biggest figs. But I think that Intrepido is kind of under the radar. I think he can sit back, come with the run, and score an upset in the Juvenile. I hope he goes off at 8-1. I suspect he's going to come down a little bit. I don't want to go anything less than 5-1.
The only problem, Brad, with your top pick is that I actually picked that one on top as well. So you might be in a little bit of trouble there. David, I was going to say the same thing for your pick in the 8th race there, the Trombetta runner. That's the only problem you may have, is that you got a big weight on the horse along with you. But David, let's talk a little bit about the juvenile and how you see this thing playing out.
Well, Intrepido could be in trouble because he's got a lot of weight on his back.
Oh,
we
no.
all are in lockstep in this race, but luckily Intrepido seems like a pretty robust horse, so maybe he can carry all three of us. We'll see about that. No, I everything Brad said, I agree. I mean, we're on the same page in both of these dirt races on Friday. I think that Intrepido could pick him up late, especially if Brandt and Ted Noffey hook up at some point in the middle of this race, which it feels is likely because Brandt is probably going to go towards the front end. He's got the most speed, and Ted Noffey probably will follow him into the race. And at some point, these two have got to race each other because they are the two protagonists in this race. And I trust Ted Noffey to get the distance a little more. But like Brad, I also think Ted Noffey is being just a smidge overrated coming into this race because we've seen 2-year-olds, run big figures against softer competition before. They get to the Breeders' Cup. They can't always reproduce those numbers. And this will be the toughest test of his career to date.
When I had the pleasure of interviewing Ned Toffee, Ted Noffey, I did the same thing. I called him Ted Noffey, Ned Toffee, back and forth about 5 different times through the interview. It messes us all up, but it's a fun story, and he's certainly the horse to beat in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Let's turn the page to the final of the Breeders' Cup races on Friday. Remember, keep sending in selections, questions, comments, anything you have, and then we'll move to Breeders' Cup Saturday in just a moment. So we close things out with the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. It's going to go as race number 10. And David, again, when they drew this field, not only was Gstaad drawn towards the outside, but also a couple other horses like Hey Nene and Botas, who would probably have been second, third, fourth, right choices, right in the mix of some of the top contenders in here. A lot of them are all drawn towards the outside. What's your opinion? Did you make any changes, or you said you adjusted this one a little bit more based on the post draw?
Yeah, it's a real problem for handicapping this race because all of the appealing options are drawn in undesirable post positions. I initially had Gstaad as a 6-5 favorite in this race, but I just felt he couldn't go off at that price given the post draw, and especially when you watch his races, he's not a horse who's like precise, who would be comfortable dropping to the back early and trying to save ground. He wants to be in the first half of the pack, so they're going to have to send him from the gate, try to get over. Maybe they could follow a horse like Hey Nene into the race if he's aggressively ridden, which feels like it's his only option, but it does create some uncertainty about how much ground Gstaad is going to lose around these turns. I will say, just in terms of the relative ability of these two Aidan O'Brien horses compared to the rest of the field, I think Gstaad has a similar advantage in terms of raw talent that Precise does to the juvenile fillies turf field against this field. Because even though he's lost his last 3 in a row, I think he was facing some pretty good horses over in Europe, and he does not go down without a fight. This is a pretty game horse. I just wonder a little bit about his trip and his adaptability to American racing.
Brad, does the wide post scare you off of Gstaad in here?
Absolutely, it does. It does not in the case of Precise, who we talked about in the juvenile fillies turf because of her running style. But from post number 14, Gstaad is just way up against it. Had he drawn inside in the middle or inside of this field, if David had made him 6-5, I might have said that was a huge overlay. I don't like him at 9-5. I picked him on top. He's the best horse in the race. 3 consecutive Group 1 runner-up finishes. He's the class of the field by a mile. I just don't know what type of trip he can possibly get from post number 14 with the type of running style that David just outlined. And having said that, my second preference is right to his inside, number 13, Hey Nene, who's going to have to go from where he's at. He's done nothing wrong so far. He's 3 for 3. They skipped a final prep to come in fresh. He's going to fire 14-13 for me. But guys, I have absolutely no confidence in either one of those two horses, Gstaad or Hey Nene.
I actually picked the 13 on top, and the way the race is shaped up, I think it actually might be okay for Hey Nene. David, could you pull up the Timeform US pace projector in here? Because honestly, for this type of race, there isn't that much early speed on paper. It really looks like the Wesley Ward runner outfielder is going to go. And I think Hey Nene from the outside can clear over, can cross over, and maybe sit second right behind that runner and not have to be hooked quite as wide as some of the others who aren't quite as fast as Hey Nene. Because I don't know how far Hey Nene would want to be off the pace to begin with, but I did like the fact that he showed us he can flip off a little bit and sit second or sit third and not be a runoff type speed horse. So of those horses that were drawn towards the outside, I'm not sure it's going to hurt Hey Nene quite as much because he may have the speed to overcome it in a race where I think he's just faster than almost everybody directly drawn to his inside.
I think it's a fair point. Obviously, outfielder's going to go, but it's not like there's a ton of speed drawn inside of him in this race. I mean, the Europeans are obviously not shown on that pace projector because we don't have pace data for the overseas races. Of them, only North Coast is the one that has shown front-running speed, but often that doesn't really translate to American racing, especially in an event like the Breeders' Cup. So I agree, Gino, he could get over. It's just a matter of how good you think he is. I'm on the fence about the quality of that group of California 2-year-olds, but he definitely is a horse that has done a little wrong so far in his career. And I guess I'll just transition to the horse that I picked in this race, who's right to his inside, the number 12 Botas, and another horse who's undefeated. I like that he's shown a little bit of versatility in his races because he went back to last in his debut, made this big late run to pass everybody, getting pace to close into. The pace wasn't as hot last time in the Pilgrim, and he at least showed the ability to get mid-pack position. He did get to save ground. He was on the inside most of the way, but I like what the move that he was able to make coming to upper stretch, where he angles out pretty professionally for a 2-year-old. He is the horse in the green silks, the number 4, about third, moving outside of the number 9 with the Klarovich silks right there. And he gets a hard bump from that chestnut right inside of him here. And he's still able to come on through that hole, maintain his momentum, fight off a rival to his outside. I just like the gameness this horse shows coming to the wire here. He gallops out really strongly. I think there's more to this horse than we see on paper, but he's another one that's going to need some racing luck from a tough post.
He's not flashy, right? And I kind of like that about him, in that he's not a horse with this huge late turn of foot. Like you said, he's kind of workmanlike. He was always going to win that race, even though he never really got a clean trip. He was sort of always being leaned on there, and he kind of pushed his way on out. I do always look at these juvenile races, and even sometimes the races with older horses, but when we have the European runners who come from overseas and they're much more their resume on the grass a lot of times is much better. They're much classier. I do use the American speed as sometimes the equalizer. I think if they get beat sometimes, it's because there was a horse who was just a little too quick, something that they weren't quite used to, or the horses maybe get the jump on them, get smoother and cleaner trips. That's sort of what I was looking with Hey Nene. Botas is obviously a logical contender. Any final thoughts, Brad, on the juvenile turf before we flip to Saturday?
Yeah, I just want to say that you make a very compelling point with regards to Hey Nene, but if that's the argument in favor of Hey Nene, maybe we should take another look at the horse who's going to make the lead. And why can't the outfielder pop the gate, get on top, slow it down, cruise, and go gate to wire? I mean, the time form pace projector is there for a reason, to identify potential pace scenarios. And number 3 outfielder is not impossible if he clears this field. I don't have a lot of confidence in my selection in this race. Just throwing that out there for something to think about.
Brad, I think he's the type of horse you want to have in like a pick 4 or pick 5, especially if you have a stronger opinion earlier, because if he's got 2 lengths on the field turning for home and you've had a nice sequence, you want to have that guy on your ticket. He's going to be a fair price and he could be loose on the front end. So I agree with you. Maybe you want to use a few of these horses who have some early speed. Before we flip to Saturday, we want to remind you though about DRF Newbie. And this is something that you want to share with any of your friends that are new horse racing fans.
Think horse racing is too complicated? Think again.
And they're off.
Every pro was a newbie once. Meet DRF Newbie, the mobile tool loaded with daily racing form data and the power of DRF AI.
What a shocker!
Get the insights you need fast so you can play smarter and feel more confident. DRF Newbie, horse racing made simple. Try it free today. Visit newbie.drf.com.
I know that every year on the Breeders' Cup, on the Kentucky Derby, Preakness, and the Belmont, I'll get some text messages from people that I haven't heard from all throughout the year. And they'll always ask me for a couple picks here and there. If you have any friends that you're bringing to the track that maybe aren't the most hardcore horse racing fans, maybe they're novice, they're new to the game, let them know about DRF Newbie. It will give them graphs. It will give them a visual learning experience. And then that may help them take the next step up to past performances. David, sometimes opening up those PPs for someone who doesn't really know what they're looking at, it can be overwhelming. So the charts and the graphs really help with DRF Newbie. Check it out, newbie.drf.com. Let's get to race number 4 on Saturday, the Breeders' Cup Saturday. So we will start with the filly and mare sprint. And in this one, Brad, thought that we're had a few different horses that we're going to take some money, spread out a little bit in here. Did you have a strong opinion to start things out in the Breeders' Cup filly and mare sprint on Saturday?
I think Sweet Azteca is clearly the horse to beat. The question is, how much pressure is she going to have to take from the filly to her outside, Hull and Ice? Sweet Azteca is a speed horse. So is Hull and Ice. So I think that Sweet Azteca is quicker, but she's going to be pressed by Hull and Ice from the outside. And those two could potentially compromise one another. There's been 3 Breeders' Cups at Del Mar. All 3 filly mare sprints were won from off the pace, including Soul of an Angel at $41 and Bar of Gold at $136. This is the type of race that in its brief history at Del Mar has a history of completely falling apart. So that is problematic possibly for Sweet Azteca. Second selection in the race would be I can't even find it on my PP, number 4, Tamara, of course, the most well-bred horse in the field by Into Mischief and out of the Hall of Fame mare Beholder. Tamara had a terrific, easy, confidence-building comeback win in a grade 3. She showed that she can sit. She had nothing behind her that day. I get it, but she has trained exceptionally well. And it was only 2 summers ago that Tamara scored a dazzling victory over the Del Mar racetrack in the grade 1 Del Mar debutante as a 2-year-old. And that's why she was odds on in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, her next start at Santa Anita. Unfortunately for Tamara, she had a splint injury, sustained a splint injury in the Breeders' Cup, and it's taken forever for Mandela, her trainer, to get her back to the races. So I like the 2 favorites, Sweet Azteca and Tamara. Not very creative. I also respect Hope Road, whose win in the Ballerina was sensational. And Hope Road actually could get the best trip of all, sitting 3rd behind the 2 dueling leaders. So long-winded way of saying I like the 2 favorites, Sweet Azteca and Tamara.
David, it could be a huge few days for Spendthrift Farms. How nice is it that they had, for most of the year, the horse who would have been the favorite in this division, Copian. Yeah. And then once Tamara shows up with a pretty good performance, they said, you know what, we could probably split these 2 and be 2 of the top betting choices in the sprint and the filly and mare sprint. They're probably going to have the favorite in the juvenile and maybe the second choice in the juvenile fillies as well. So could be just a massive weekend for Spendthrift. And this is one of them. How do you see this race playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off by saying I'm against both horses that Brad likes in this race. So we finally disagree in a dirt race.
There we go.
The Breeders' Cup. But I'm very worried about what Brad mentioned, the pace scenario for Sweet Azteca, because to be honest, when you go back and watch some of her biggest speed figures outside of the races at Los Al, where it just seems she loves that Los Alamitos dirt course. I mean, she's run her best races when she's able to get clear up front. That was certainly the case too back when she beat Copian in the Great Lady M. I just don't see that trip coming for her here with speed drawn to the outside of her. And I've got to imagine at least one of the Baffords, even outside of Hall and Ice, is going to go after Sweet Azteca in the early stages. I think Hope Road is being trained to do so and certainly has the speed to be forward in this race. So I don't envision Sweet Azteca getting her preferred trip. Maybe she's good enough to overcome it, but at a short price, I wanted to go against her. And, with Tamara, she's a horse that I had trouble assessing. I guess you could argue that she has upside second off the very long layoff here, but I actually want to throw a question at Brad because I'm wondering, Brad, what you make of the fact that Richard Mandela is splitting these horses up, sending Kopi into the sprint and Tamara being left here. Do you view it as a positive for both of them or more of a positive for one or the other?
Well, I think they put Copian in the sprint to pave the way for Tamara to win the filly mare sprint, to be honest, because I think Copian would have been close to being a slam dunk in the filly mare sprint. Yeah. She's instead going against the boys. I know that Mandela wants to split them up, but now he has 2 in the sprint, and then his second one in the sprint beyond Copian is okay. Big City Lights. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think, just my opinion, I don't know this for sure, it looked to me like they wanted Copian, let's put her in a different race, and let's try to make it as easy as possible for Tamara to win this race, for what it's worth.
David, you were sort of hinting that you think the pace might heat up a little bit, or that it could be at least fair and tough for some of the horses on the lead to win. That brings you towards the outside with a horse who could maybe sit off the pace a little bit. We've talked about this horse Rishi a few times, and it just felt like there were a lot of races where she didn't get the ideal trip, or maybe she was like the chase mode of the Baffert runners that were when there were multiple Baffert horses in a race. I feel like from the outside, cutting back in distance here, she might be able to get a pretty good trip.
Yeah, I like to talk about the Baffert choreography that goes into a lot of these races when he's got multiple horses in. And just look at her past performances. In 3 of her last 4 races, she was in against Cavalieri, Seismic Beauty, and then Cavalieri again. And those were the favored Baffert horses in those races. Those were the ones that had the high profiles coming in. And there are horses that like to get forward position, especially Seismic Beauty. And you would just watch some of those races, especially the Clementelle Hirsch, where Ricci wanted to show speed. And it was just so obvious that she was under instructions not to go after Seismic Beauty in the early stages. So she's a really talented horse, and I don't feel like she's necessarily been campaigned to make the most of her talent up until this point. But now she's turning back in distance. She showed when she first got to this country that she could sprint just fine. And these South American imports, they typically get better and better the more that they acclimate to the US. So I don't think it was necessarily the added distance that made her a better horse. I just think it was getting more accustomed to US racing. And she's in top form now. She's turning back to a distance that I know she handles. And I think she's going to get a very good trip perched outside of what could be a pace duel.
I was basically a combination of what you both said. I didn't think this was the race where I could find some big prices. I thought the horses who were going to be all in that 5-6-1 range and below were the ones that made a lot of sense. The horses who Brad mentioned, Sweet Azteca, Tamara, and Hope Road's obviously a logical contender. I did land on Ricci on top, hoping that this one could sit off the pace just a little bit from the outside. And I agree with you, David. I've been following this mare along since she first came into the Baffert barn. She first came into the US, and they had a couple hiccups with her where she would race and she was backed up a little bit. And she's actually a really nice filly if you look at her entire, body of work. And she's a grade 1 winner in Chile from 6.5 furlongs all the way to 1.25 miles. So she really has some talent there if she gets the opportunity to run her race. Brad, any final thoughts on this one before we turn the page?
No, I'm going to concede to you guys. I took the 2-1 favorite without a lot of confidence. I think the Sweet Aztec is the horse to beat with a gate to wire win over a track where that's never happened in the Breeders' Cup yet in the Filly Mare Sprint.
We move to the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. That's going to go as race number 5. And in this one, David, you're going to have horses that ran well in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint last year coming back. So I think from a starting point when you're making the morning line, probably starting with a couple horses like Motorius and AG Bullet, who both ran really good races last year over this course, finishing 2nd and 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint.
Yeah, I think that is the starting point for this race because they are both horses that showed that they handled this 5-furlong configuration at Del Mar. I will say they both got very good trips in the turf sprint last year. You could argue that Motorius was a little unlucky not to win the race because you'll see he has a spot of trouble at the top of the stretch where he has to pause a little bit, and that allows Starlust, the winner, to sort of build a little more momentum coming through along the inside. Motorius is the horse in the pink with the white blinkers who's angling outside of the gray AG Bullet right here, and Motorius comes with that patented late finish that we're so accustomed to seeing from him. He loves this Del Mar turf course. 5 furlongs is not too short for him, and crucially, he showed that he was just fine breaking from the rail in this race last year, so I'm not too worried about the possibility of him getting shuffled back in the early stages of this race. I just think he's a very reliable option in this race, and it does feel like there should be enough speed to set up his late run.
Brad, 5 furlongs on the turf, it can be very different than 6.5 furlongs on the turf and how that plays at Santa Anita coming down the hill. I was extremely impressed with Reef Runner, who showed that they can be a 5 furlong horse and also be a horse who can go down that 6.5 furlong down the hill. I thought that was not going to be the type of trip that Reef Runner wanted. This is a horse who's been really sharp now, has crossed the wire first 3 times in a row, had a very unlucky DQ in the Green Flash. Do you give this horse a chance? And if not, tell us who you like in here.
Yeah, I do give Reef Runner a chance. I respect the heck out of this horse. He was just a regular horse until trainer David Fox gelded him this spring. And since then, he's crossed the wire first in all 3 starts. You don't see too many horses that are able to win a 5 furlong turf sprint at Del Mar and 6.5 down the hill at Santa Anita. And that's exactly what Reef Runner did. His price is double that of Motorius virtually at 6-1. I think they're very, very close. In fact, Reef Runner actually finished in front of Motorius when they met at Del Mar this summer. But they both have to work out a trip. It's not going to be easy in this big field. I'm going the other way, and I'm taking a speed horse who could get run into the ground. But the way that Bring the Band Home ran this summer at Saratoga, I thought it was outstanding. His back-to-back wins in a regular non-graded stake and the Troy with a wicked display of speed in both starts. And David, I want to ask you this. Does 43 and change at Saratoga, it seems fast to me. Is it as fast as it looks on paper?
The Saratoga turf course was definitely, baked by the sun and as hard as it gets at that point in time. But I mean, this horse did run some fast fractions. He is a naturally fast horse. I mean, you can see he just runs this field off its feet. When he gets his preferred trip, Brad, up front, setting the pace all by himself, he can run these monstrous performances, almost on par with Cogburn last year. The problem I've got with this horse, Brad, and I don't want to knock him too much because I think he's going to be a price in this race, was when I handicapped those races at Saratoga this summer, he looked like the lone speed in both of them on paper and handicapped that way. I'm not sure he's the lone speed in this race, but he might be the naturally most fast. We'll see how hard he has to work to get to the front.
Well, I think he's the speed of the speed. He's my top selection and one of my creative selections on the Breeders' Cup Friday, Saturday. I think Bring the Band Home has a chance to make the lead, run them off their feet, and spring an upset. He's listed at odds of 10-1. There's a European shipper by the name of Arizona Blaze I'm also interested in, coming off a win in the Group 1 in Ireland. I think he's the best of the Europeans. So I'm going with a couple of long shots. Number 5, Bring the Band Home on the front end, and the shipper, Arizona Blaze, coming from slightly off, shipping in from Europe.
Yeah, Arizona Blaze also was a horse who has raced over this turf course, was second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint last year. So one that we know likes this 5 furlong layout, shouldn't have a problem with that. And actually, in that race, he came from way, way out of it, David. He's been more of a speed horse this year in his races, and his form has been very good. But I think he'll probably be a little bit off the pace because with Bring the Band Home, I mean, she's so spicy, right? There's some pretty quick horses in here. How do you see this thing playing out?
Yeah, I mean, from a pace standpoint, I think that they are going to be moving up front in this race. As you said, Bring the Band Home's got a lot of speed. She's so spicy, she's very fast. And I'll just point out, don't underestimate the number 12, Invincible Papa, having a significant impact on this race. I don't think he's going to win the race, but when you watch this horse in Japan, he is very fast. He is a one-way front runner, and I know he's been going 6 furlongs, not 5, but he is a good gate horse, and if he breaks cleanly, he could have something to say about how this race is run and how fast the pace is. Again, don't think he's a win candidate, but he's one that could be pressing from the outside. And for me, Gino, I think the number 3, Arizona Blaze, as long as he works out the kind of trip he did in the Juvenile Turf Sprint last year, he's dangerous. I've got him in the mix. But the 2 that I wanted were the 2 drawn down towards the inside, Motorius, who we covered, and the number 2, Reef Runner. He's the one that I want the most. As Brad said, he's twice the price of Motorius on the line. I think I'm going to get around 6-1 in this race, and he's supposed to get a good trip in mid-pack. He's got more tactical speed than Motorius does. And when I went back and watched prior Breeders' Cup turf sprints that were run at Del Mar, having rail position was so important. That was certainly the case last year when the top 3, the trifecta finishers, all rode the rail around the turn. And I think Tyler Gaffaleone is going to have the opportunity to work out exactly that kind of trip on Reef Runner.
One horse, just to mention a bit more, AG Bullet is a horse who I respect a lot, and I felt like initially I was going to pick her in this field. I am a little bit worried about her getting hooked a bit wide in here because there is some speed down to her inside, and she wants to be close. She can sit off and pass horses, but I could see that being a little bit difficult for her if she does get parked a little bit in here. She's capable of winning at the highest level. We saw her winning grade 1s earlier in the year against the boys. Brad, final thoughts on this one before we turn the page?
Wire to wire for Bring the Band Home.
There we go. Let's move to the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We had somebody asking just a moment ago, which race is Imagination in? Imagination is in here. And David, I'll ask you because he became a new player in this division, kind of seemingly out of nowhere. He hadn't been racing for most of the year. He was a horse who was a talented 3-year-old. He was precocious. He didn't really want to go farther as the distance had stretched out. So the cutback on paper looked solid for him. He ran such a funny race visually. He was out way in the middle of the track. And I mean, he looked like he just kind of jumped in at the top of the stretch, and he just inhales the field, and he's not even really being asked as he's just moving by them. He was a horse I was really impressed by there, and I thought maybe the Breeders' Cup Sprint could be a really nice spot for this horse who's always had talent. Maybe he just found the right niche for himself, David.
Yeah, he's the horse in the yellow cap who is ranging up outside here. And you can see, I mean, he's not even changing over to his right lead at the top of the stretch. He's lugging in a little bit. Doesn't even seem totally focused on the task at hand, but he just has so much natural ability that he's able to carry his momentum forward. And I'll even let this play out a little bit after the wire. He gallops out really strongly in this race. He was much the best on this day and was just ready to put forth a huge performance. I never have liked this horse before, Gino. I don't know exactly what to make of it. I wasn't thrilled with the field that was just behind him this day, but he's a bit of a wild card in this field.
Yeah, Brad, we saw him out here on the West Coast for most of his career. That was a big performance. Do you give him a chance? And if not, talk to us about some of the other horses you like in here.
Yeah, I do give Imagine. I respect that win. He was wide, as David said. He was in the parking lot and he just came away. That was also the day that Straight No Chaser laid an egg and Dr. Venkman was in the field. He's not really a true 3/4 horse. So there is some skepticism on my part with regards to the field that he beat. But visually, it was a very impressive win by Imagination. I picked him second behind a horse that I think is the most probable winner, Breeders' Cup winner on the Saturday card. And that's the favorite, number 10, Ben Tornado. He ran in this race a year ago. He ran well. He finished second behind Straight No Chaser. And then he had all sorts of issues throughout the early part of the year. He had to scratch from a big race. They finally got him back to the races, and he came with a super comeback win at Churchill Downs. He's trained like a beast since then. He's the fastest horse in the race, in my opinion. He's drawn outside. He doesn't have to have the lead. He can sit if necessary. He's listed at 5-2. If Ben Tornado goes off at 5-2, I might take a piece of that. I think he's a standout in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. So Ben Tornado over late runner Imagination in the Breeders' Cup Sprint.
David, Ben Tornado will take some money. Copian on the inside decided to come to this race instead of being a heavy favorite in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mares Sprint. She'll certainly be one of the choices in here. Talk to us about those horses and your final opinion in the sprint.
Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for Ben Tornado. I think Brad's assessment of him, it just makes a whole lot of sense. He was a good 3-year-old. He clearly improved off the layoff, making that belated 4-year-old debut. I am a little concerned about how much speed is drawn towards the outside of the starting gate. There are two really fast horses drawn outside of Ben Tornado, Straight No Chaser and Madhouse. So it feels like Ben Tornado is going to have to rate behind horses, maybe take some kickback, something he hasn't done that often in his career. So I'm a little concerned about that for him, but being drawn towards the outside is definitely a better place to be than where Copian is drawn on the rail. That's a bit of a concern. I will say, though, from a raw ability standpoint, I believe Copian is the best horse in this race. I've been really impressed with what she's done, especially early this year. I was scratching my head when Andy Beyer assigned a 110 to the 4-horse Santa Monica going back to February of this year. But you can open up DRF Formulator, look at the chart. That is a number that has stood up to scrutiny. The top 3 of the top 4 finishers outside of Copian are actually players in the Filly and Mare Sprint earlier on this card. This whole field was going to be in the Filly and Mare Sprint before Copian was rerouted to this race. So that was legit, and I thought her performance in the Derby City Distaff was awesome. That was arguably a stronger race top to bottom than the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint came up at the end of the season. And she showed in that race that she can get the kind of trip that she's probably going to work out in this sprint, where she broke from an inside post, took a lot of kickback, and not just kickback, but sloppy kickback over a wet track at Churchill Downs. She ran right through it and still won that race going away. And Brad, I'm sure you've seen the video of, or probably in person if you watched some of her recent workouts. I think that October 18th workout where she zipped away from some overmatched mates and went 112 gave Richard Mandela the confidence to make this call to go in the sprint. And I love that old school 33 and change blow up the other day. It just feels like she is thriving coming into this race. And I would be shocked if she doesn't run a big race. I just wonder if she can get the trip, but I'm not going to worry about that too much if she's the second choice.
Well, she's down on the inside, so you always have to worry about the trip you're going to get in a dirt sprint when you're drawn on the rail, and I think that's the biggest obstacle for Copian. If she had drawn in the middle of the field or even toward the outside, I'd respect her a lot more. I do think that Ben Tornado can still get that trip. There's one crazy horse I just want to mention before we move on to the next race, guys. The Japan import, number 9, American Stage. This is a 3-year-old who is running in this spring in Dubai in the Golden Shaheen. He finished 6th by a little bit more than 3 lengths. But if you watch a video of that race, he was actually in the hunt until deep stretch. A 3-year-old in April taking on the best sprinters really in the world in spring and running a creditable race. He'd been off since then. He was off since then. Had a comeback race that was disappointing according to his trainer, Yoshito Yahagi, but he should move forward off that race. And I thought that American Stage at a giant number, what's he listed, 30-1, had a chance to hit the board. But I do like Ben Tornado.
I will give you one that I've just been impressed with all year. We don't see horses run 10 times in a year anymore. And Banishing is a horse who shows up, whether it's going long, whether it's going short, any of the big races. What I really wanted to isolate with Banishing too are the last couple sprint races. If you look at this horse, can go from 6 furlongs all the way to 1 1/8 miles. But the last 2 times he sprinted, he beat a horse named Booth, who had won 4 in a row earlier this year. But the race that I'm really interested in is the Churchill Downs back in May, when he was second in a dead heat with Nisos. He was just behind Mindframe, and he was in front of Bookham Dano. That ended up being one of the stronger races of the year, and he was right in the mix with all of these other really, really talented horses who are at the top of their divisions. I think Banishing is a horse who could get a very nice trip from off the pace if they go quick enough. He'll just back up a little bit. He'll hope they go quick in here early, and he'll come rolling late. I think he's classy enough to stack up with this group. It's just going to come down to the trip. He's down towards the inside. You can get traffic down there, but I do respect his ability quite a bit. David or Brad, if you have a thought on him.
Yeah, I saw we got a comment about Banishing, so I'm glad you brought him up. So there's some interest in this horse. I agree, Gino. I think he can be rolling late in this race. I wonder if he can pass them all, because looking how this field is going to shape up from a pace scenario, he could be 12th, 13th, 14th in the early going. So yeah. I worry a little bit on the turn back if he's going to get really badly outrun. But you're right. He can get this distance, and he's got a big finish on him.
Brad, we didn't mention last year's winner at all, Straight No Chaser. Do we give him a chance in his second start back? They had a campaign planned out for him. He missed a lot of this year because he ran in some big races earlier in the year. They wanted to get a prep race and then point to the Breeders' Cup Sprint for back-to-back. Do you think he can do it 2 years in a row?
You can give him a pass for his misfire in Dubai in the Golden Shaheen. A lot of things went wrong on that trip, but I don't think you can forgive him for his most recent start. He was supposed to win the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. He trained well going into the race. He was the odds-on favorite, and he completely spit it out inside the 8th pole. So I suspect that Straight No Chaser is not as sharp this year as he was 1 year ago, and you can see that in the speed figures. A year ago, he earned a 103 in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. This year, he earned a 93. He's not the same horse at this stage of his career as he was a year ago.
David, I also wonder if this year's sprint is a little bit tougher than last year's sprint on paper with horses like Copian. We're talking about Imagination. I think you have the top 3 finishers from last year all back, including a horse like Mulligan, but I just felt like this group might be a little bit deeper overall than last year's.
Yeah, I agree. It's a deeper race, so I don't want to rely too much on the form from last year. And I think the point Brad was making is fair, that Straight No Chaser doesn't look quite as good, and it feels like his main rival, Ben Tornado, has gone in the opposite direction. He's clearly gotten better since last year, and that's a problem for horses like Straight No Chaser and Mulligan.
Yeah, Straight No Chaser also had kind of a weird race when he won the Breeders' Cup last year. He's not a horse who's been off the pace very much. He dropped back in that race, almost looked like he was done for a minute. And then I think his class provided him to come back on and win the race. So it's hard for me to project the type of trip he would get with all the other speed in here. I think he's best when he's able to really stretch his legs in races where there's not as much early speed. Let's put a bow on the Breeders' Cup Sprint and turn the page to the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Want to let everybody know that I think the command center is all set up now at DRF.com, at shop.drf.com. We've got everything you need, past performances for Friday and Saturday. We've got clocker reports up there. David's got the betting strategies for Friday. Saturday will be coming shortly. We have all of the resources that you need. You can put them in a package, or you can purchase the products individually. Check them all out at shop.drf.com. There's the players package. There's the VIP package. They're just different based on which products you want to use. I just saw Mike Welsh finish up with the clock reports for both days. He has been working so hard out here the last week and a half. And Brad, while we're talking about these races, I'll mention 1 or 2 horses and we get into them that I initially may not have liked as much, but I've upgraded after seeing them out on track this week. I'm curious if there are any horses like that for you that you've upgraded after watching them, because I know you've been seeing a lot of these horses train in the mornings. If we get to any of them, feel free to mention that and just to let us know. We are now ready for the Breeders' Cup Distaff, race number 7 in here, and we found out the complexion of this division is going to change about a month ago when Torpedo Anna didn't really fire and she was retired right after that. David, now we have to start with Seismic Beauty, who has just been very, very impressive for Bob Baffert. If you look at her 3 races in a row, she has won easily. She hasn't really been tested at all. She's got big speed. She's going to go. What do you think about her, and set up the race a little bit for us here?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, Seismic Beauty almost can't lose this race because she's improving on the way in. She's got this massive speed figure advantage. She's undefeated around 2 turns. I mean, she goes out for a top barn. She's on her home court in Southern California. It just looks like everything is going her way. The problem is they don't run races on paper. And the Breeders' Cup Distaff drew a large field. I mean, it'll be 12 now because we heard earlier today that Scottish Lassie is coming out. But still, it is by far the largest field that Seismic Beauty has ever faced. And let's be honest, when you go back to watch some of her prior races, she was beating mostly her stablemates. I know she defeated Kopian last time. Kopian's not at her best going around 2 turns, and Kopian, personally, I don't think she got the best ride in that race either.
She was way far back in that race. Yeah.
Yeah. And Seismic Beauty was facing stablemates that were clearly under instructions not to tangle with her early. That's not going to be the case in here. She's not facing a bunch of other Baffert horses. She's got, runners to her inside that could go, like Clico or Nitrogen. To her outside, she's got horses like Gunsong and Dry Powder who could show some early speed. Even Jinjin, Alice Verite is a potential wild card with regard to the pace. I think it's going to be more competitive up front than Seismic Beauty is used to. And I just don't know if she's got the heart to dig in and fight off a better field, because we've just seen her raw talent on display up until this point. I don't really know that I have a strong sense of what kind of horse she is when she gets into a fight.
Brad, do you feel the same way that David does about the favorite in here, Seismic Beauty?
Yeah, I do 100%. I mean, we know that Seismic Beauty has the speed, but does she have the class? I mean, it's one thing to go out there, be on the lead, and earn a big figure against a bunch of nobodies. But there are somebodies in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and one of those is Jinjin, who is going to be forwardly placed and nipping at Seismic Beauty's heels. Nitrogen also has speed, from the inside post that jockey Jose Ortiz is going to ask her for a run early, so she'll be forwardly placed. Scylla's not going to be far behind. This is a completely different group of fillies and mares that Seismic Beauty is going to be facing on Saturday than she did in her last 2 starts against a bunch of no-names at Santa Anita. I respect any horse who can earn a 110 buyer speed figure. And David's right. If they all run to their last race big, she wins the race gate to wire. I see her as a extremely vulnerable favorite. And I picked her third just because, I don't want to be a complete moron. I like Dorth Vader, who skipped her final prep. She was good enough to defeat, or almost defeat, Torpedo Anna last time out in the personal ensign. Trainer George Weaver elected to skip a prep, come in fresh into the Breeders' Cup Distaff. She's training very well. We know she's top class. She was a grade 1 winner on the slop. She was a grade 1 runner-up to last year's Horse of the Year, Torpedo Anna, in the personal ensign. She is ready to fire her best shot, which is likely to be her swan song. I like Dorth Vader. She's listed at a very juicy 5-1. I picked Nitrogen second, an improving 3-year-old filly who I thought ran better than Jin last time out. It was the first start against older Ford Nitrogen. She was wide every step of the way. She was pressing Torpedo Anna. Ortiz told the trainer Mark Cassie in the paddock, I'm not going to let Torpedo Anna get away from me. That's why she was up there close. And Torpedo Anna was able to get the best of Nitrogen, was able to get the best of Torpedo Anna, but that Jinjin just kept on running. Nitrogen ran well in defeat is my point. I like Dorth Vader and Nitrogen 12-1 to upset one of the more heavily favored runners on the card, Seismic Beauty.
Yeah, this is a key race, David, when we're handicapping the Breeders' Cup Distaff, right? We have a couple of the horses in this race that finished 1, 2, 3 that will be back in here. And that was Torpedo Anna, who was backing up. And that was the final time we saw her out on the racetrack.
Yeah, this replay of the Spinster. I mean, Jinjin ran the big race at Keeneland that we've seen out of her before. I think Nitrogen drifting through the stretch proved to be her Achilles heel here, because it looked like she had Jinjin within her sights and had her measured, and she just drifted out about 3 or 4 paths to the center of the racetrack, appeared to lose some focus. And that bothers me with Nitrogen, because we saw her do the same thing in the Alabama, where she drifted in the stretch. Didn't matter that day because she was facing a weaker group of 3-year-old fillies. But I do have some concerns about that for her losing focus at the end of her races, and also the rail draw, because while she's handled dirt, if you go back and watch her 3 prior dirt races, Jose Ortiz kept her out in the clear, out of kickback from outside posts every single time. And she's probably not going to have that opportunity here breaking from the rail in a large field. So I do worry about that for Nitrogen. And, Gino, I
thank you for not pulling up the replay. I appreciate the Dorth Vader replay. I know you were saving us some heartbreak because we needed her that day. But and you and I spoke about this, I think, with Captain Cook recently too, right? Yeah. When you have a horse that you play at a big price and you like them and they just miss, do you want to come right back with them at half the price the next time? I go back and forth on that, but I will say in a totally separate context, this was one of the horses that I upgraded this week based on watching in the mornings. I thought she's looked really, really good, completely separate from what she's done on the track. So she fits really well in here, David. What do you do with Dorth Vader?
Gino, I really went back and forth with her because when I was handicapping this race before the post position draw, I thought she was going to be a really appealing option. She's a horse that I feel like I've been really in tune with all year. I mean, I thought she was so underrated coming out of that La Troyenne where she got the toughest trip, and she really should have won that day when you go back to watch the replay. I mean, I was on her in the Ogden Phipps, I was on her in the personal lens, and I feel like I've been on the right side of Darth Vader this year. But my opinion about her, it's really rooted in the belief that she is able to get this 9 furlong distance only when John Velasquez gets her covered up early. She's a little bit like Fierceness in that way, where Johnny has to get her shut off in the early stages and then kind of produce her at the end like a turf horse almost. And I wonder if he's almost going to have to set her off too much from this outside post to get the position he needs to get over, where she hasn't really had to worry about that in a lot of her prior races where she's run well. So the post, it really is shaking my opinion on her. So I've downgraded her a little bit, but she's a horse that I still will have on my ticket somewhere. For me, this just becomes more of a spread race.
Oh, so nothing really strong for you? You're just going to be using a few different...
I'll mention 2 long shots that are priced in this race I want to use. One of them is Scylla, who I know people are groaning out there because Scylla never wins anymore, and they tried sprinting with her. That didn't work, and now they're going back to route races almost out of desperation. Personally, I never thought sprinting worked for her. I don't think she's got the turn of foot or the speed for sprinting. So I liked her getting back out in distance in the Spinster. And while she got a good trip and wasn't quite good enough on that day, the race just didn't come back to her at the end. And this is a race where I think Junior Alvarado and Bill Mott, they realize that things have to go right for her to win. They're probably not going to get involved in the pace. Just take her back, try to make one run. She was successful using that style very early in her career. And she's the kind of horse that I think can just fly under the radar in this race and maybe pick up the pieces in a race that has the potential to fall apart at the end. And the other crazy horse that I have to use is the Japanese horse, Alice Verite. I probably made a misguided pick when I took her in this race last year against Torpedo Anna. Nobody was beating her that day, but I will say, Alice Verite ran an underrated race in last year's Breeders' Cup Distaff because she blew the start. She's a horse that when you watch her races in Japan, she's like a one-way front runner over there, but she had to learn to rate in that Breeders' Cup Distaff and actually did it pretty well and was finishing strongly across the wire, showing that she does handle the dirt. And now she's landing in a Distaff where there is no Torpedo Anna this year. I'm not saying it's an easy race to win, but she showed that she could rate last year. I don't think they're going to need to be so aggressive to make the lead with her. I just think she's a horse that deserves a long look in this race based on her one dirt performance from last season.
This is the race that I'm looking for some of those type of horses because I'm probably going to be spreading out too. I didn't have as strong of opinion, so I'll be including some of the horses that Brad and David were mentioning. Let's turn the page to the Breeders' Cup Turf. This one's going to go as race number 8, 1.5 miles on the turf course there, and we have 4 horses coming out of a couple from the Turf Classic as that was a live prep race. We have horses from all over the world coming in here, and David, a horse that is very, very talented. Is Rebel's Romance. It's probably not very often when you have a 2-time Breeders' Cup winner that won't be favored in a race, as Mini Hawk is a horse who comes off of a runner-up effort in the Arc de Triomphe, one of the most prestigious and toughest races in the world to win. It was a field of 17. She was second that day as a 3-year-old filly facing older. So this is a very, very talented horse just from a talking standpoint to start with Mini Hawk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to knock Rebel's Romance.
No.
He's really good. I did lean towards Mini Hawk in this race. I've just been really impressed watching her replays for this. It just seems like she's getting better with each and every start. I wasn't totally convinced early in the season, but she's made a believer out of me. And watching her performance in the Arc de Triomphe, I was very impressed with that. She made an early move. She really had to show a lot of stamina to battle back at the end when the winner came to her with a full head of steam. They drew well clear of the rest of the field. Yeah, it was a soft turf course that day, but she showed early in the season that she's just fine over firmer ground. And the other thing I noticed watching her races in Europe, Gino, is that for a European, she is a really good gate horse. She breaks so sharply. She outbroke the field in the Arc by like an entire length and allowed her to get really good position. So I think that attribute is going to make her well suited to American racing.
Brad, most years in this division, this is just a tough division for the American runners. We generally don't have horses that class up with the European runners in the Breeders' Cup Turf. A lot of times the filly and mare turf when they're going this long on the grass. Do you think that's the case again in here where the European runners just look like they're head and shoulders or the international runners look like they're head and shoulders above the U.S. based horses?
Yeah, I do. I mean, when you finish second in the most prestigious turf race in the world, I believe that's the case with the Arc de Triomphe. you're supposed to win the Breeders' Cup Turf, and that's Minnie Hawk. She was 5.5 lengths clear of the third place finisher in the ARC, and if she shows up, I think she wins this race. She doesn't have to be here. Aidan O'Brien could have put her away for the winter, but she must have come out of the ARC in top shape, and that's why she is here, and I think she wins this race at a short price. I respect Rebels Romance. I mean, all he's done is win 20 out of 29, won this race a year ago. There's one long shot in this race that I am very intrigued by, and it's a developing 3-year-old by the name of Amalok, number 3 Amalok, who had been getting progressively better this spring and summer. Then he took 3 months off and jumped into the first Group 1 of his career, and he finished second in the Irish St. Ledger. That was a terrific effort. His first start against Older, and Amalok finished clear of third. He ran well in defeat, and this is a 3-year-old who has a license to get better. That was his first start in 3 months. Now with that race under his belt, it's coming back in about 6 weeks or so. He has a right to improve. He's listed at 10-1. I think number 3 Amalok is the one horse that we don't know how good he can get. With 3-year-olds, you don't know what their ceiling is. So there's always the chance that they might get a little bit better. And if Amalok gets a little bit better, he's going to be right in the hunt with Minnie Hawk and Rebels Romance.
David, this is a barn that's very capable of winning Breeders' Cup races. This trainer, Ralph Beckett, won the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint last year, and Amalok is a horse who is going to go second start off a short little break. Actually made a move for it early and was going 1.75 miles last time out. It's not very often when you get a cut back to 1.5 miles, but that's going to be the case in here for Amalok. I actually picked him right on top of the 2 short price horses. I picked Amalok on top of Minnie Hawk and Rebels Romance as my top 3. How did you stack them up here, David, in the Breeders' Cup Turf?
Yeah, I'm not as, I put Amalok fourth when I did my picks for this race. I'm not as big of a fan of him as some others seem to be. It's funny. I've seen a lot of American handicappers picking him. I have seen less support from him from European handicappers that are very familiar with that form. And I think that's because, first of all, I don't love the fields that he beat in those 5 wins leading up to the Irish St. Ledger last time. And also, he's a horse that when you watch his races, he's very one-paced. He doesn't have a big turn of foot to him. And I wonder if American racing is really going to suit him, just given that staying style that he has. And look, he's a gelding. There are certain races in Europe at the top level that he can't run in being a gelding. That's the case for Rebels Romance, which is why he's been on such an international campaign and has tried, American racing. And I think Amalok's connections have expressed the fact that they would love to emulate the career of Rebels Romance with this horse. We'll see if he's good enough. I'm not quite a believer, but he probably will be a fair price.
Wanted to let everybody know too that if you're new to handicapping, you need to check out DRF Newbie. We had a commercial to show you about it a couple times throughout this show. Newbie.drf.com. I think we have a graphic for it, Lucia, that we can pull up and show you here. So test this out. If you're someone who's new to racing, this is going to help you. It'll help you take that next step into the past performances. You can scan the QR code right there on your screen, or with your mobile device, go to newbie.drf.com. At the end of the show, maybe we'll give out one or 2 of our best bets throughout, just so that way we can kind of wrap up towards the end. We're getting to race number 9 in just a moment. David, final thoughts on the Breeders' Cup Turf?
No, I think we wrapped it up. I mean, I was not viewing that as the most interesting wagering race on the card. If I'm starting off a late pick 5 sequence, I'm using some combination of the 2 favorites and probably leaning on Minnie Hawk.
Let's move to the Breeders' Cup Classic, race number 9, 1.25 miles at Del Mar on Saturday. Brad, you and I did a reaction right after the draw, and at that point, Sovereignty was still in the body of the field and looked like the horse who was going to be the favorite. But you were pointing out some track stats, some track trends. You were talking about things at 1.25 miles. I know you have some very good information about that kind of stuff. If you have any of that you want to point out about the 1.25 mile races at Del Mar, and if not, tell us now, how has the changed your handicapping? Were you on Sovereignty before, and now did you have to call an audible, or how did that play out for you?
I was not on Sovereignty. I loved Fierceness before the scratch of Sovereignty. I don't love Fierceness now because he's the 5-2 favorite. But his race last year in the Breeders' Cup Classic was outstanding. He finished second behind Sierra Leone. In the last 10 years, there have been 15 1.25 mile dirt races at Del Mar. 14 of those were won by forwardly placed horses. Everybody remembers the Breeders' Cup Classic from last year when Sierra Leone came screaming from far back to win going away, but they went the half in 44 and change that day. It fell apart, and still Fierceness was around at the end. My point is, to win a 1.25 mile dirt race at Del Mar generally requires a horse to be forwardly placed. We know that Fierceness loves this racetrack, He overcame a very eventful trip to win the Pacific Classic this summer from the number 1 hole. He tried to take a left-hand turn almost at the gap where the mile-and-a-quarter chute goes onto the main dirt oval. He tried to take a left-hand turn. Del Mar has since extended the temporary rails on that where it crosses the main track. So here we're going to take a look at watch number 1, Fierceness, try to take a left-hand turn after the break. The break's okay. He's going fine right here, but then all of a sudden, whoa, look at that. Okay, so he saw something. He spooked from the open area after the temporary rails. They've extended those temporary rails. There's less of a chance that Fierceness is going to do the same thing. And Johnny V, he's going to be prepared for if Fierceness does decide to do it again. The problem now is price. You're always looking for value, and I really don't see that Fierceness at 5-2 offers any value. He was my top selection and a real courageous one at 4-1 before Sovereignty. At 5-2, he's just the horse that I picked on top. I think he's the best horse in the race, but he's not a slam dunk, and that's not a really great price. I'm still on the Baeza bandwagon to some degree. That should really come as no surprise to David, I'm sure.
No.
I've loved this horse even back when he was a maiden.
Before he was even qualified for the Derby. Yeah, you were absolutely.
Exactly. He's a May fool. He's always been kind of playing catch up in terms of development behind the likes of Sovereignty and Journalism. Now we're late in the 3-year-old season. I know he didn't beat much in the Pennsylvania Derby, but it was a confidence-building win in fast time, a 105 Beyer speed figure. He did it the right way, trained well since. I think that Baeza might still have another forward move in him. 3-year-olds in fall, I love them. Improving 3-year-olds in fall. And I think Baeza has a big chance. I'm on Fierceness. Baeza, my second choice.
And this was a question that came up earlier, asking us about January foals versus horses like that were May foals. And Brad was kind of getting into it a little bit right there with Baeza. David, normally, if we had a race where the Kentucky Derby winner and the Belmont winner was scratched and removed, it would feel a little lackluster on paper. And we're all very disappointed that we don't see Sovereignty, but we've got the top 3 finishers from last year's Breeders' Cup Classic all back. We've got Baeza, who Brad just mentioned. We've got Journalism as 2 very good 3-year-olds stepping up and facing that group of older horses. It is still a very, very intriguing race, and one where you could go 5-6 different directions.
Yeah, and I never quite agreed with the people that were calling it the best Breeders' Cup Classic ever, but your point is well taken, Gino. It's still a very good race, even without Sovereignty in here. I mean, just having a rematch of last year's Breeders' Cup Classic is mouthwatering because those were really good 3-year-olds, and we were so looking forward to what they would do as 4-year-olds when they all stayed in training, and now we get to see the matchup again. We don't often get that treat in horse racing, so this is still a really good race. I'll just briefly, circle back to where Brad ended. Brad, you've made a believer out of me with Baeza. I didn't pick him on top, but he's my second pick in here, and he's a horse that I am definitely using in this race. Focusing on the horses from last year's Breeders' Cup Classic, and I do think that's the focal point of this race. Fierceness, I just don't know what to do with. He is a horse that I thought prior to the Pacific Classic, his career might be over because he had been so disappointing in a series of races from the Met Mile to the Whitney. And yeah, he got back on track in the Pacific Classic. Maybe he just loves California. I still don't totally trust Fierceness, though I acknowledge, like Brad said, he probably is the horse to beat in this race. Sierra Leone, a horse who's so pace dependent. And, Brad was making the point about the track profile of Del Mar. Let's remember when he won the Classic last year, not only did he make a big run from towards the back of the pack and the early pace helped him, he made a move on the backstretch of that race to get to the half-mile pole where he was in position to take the race over before they got to the quarter pole. I have not seen Sierra Leone do that since then, and I don't know if he's still capable of making an early move like that. He's been a little more sluggish in his races recently, so I'm not quite sure that I trust him to win the race either. I think he's a horse that could get a piece of it. And, Gino, it just leads me back to a horse that I've always liked, the number 5, Forever Young. He's raced twice in this country before. You could argue he was a little bit unlucky to lose both of them. The Kentucky Derby, that trip's been much talked about. It wasn't a big excuse, but when the margin was so thin, he could have won that race. And then the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, I think they made a tactical error when they sent him so aggressively, being concerned about getting shuffled back from the rail, and he ended up chasing what was a very fast pace, whereas that is Fierceness's natural style. It's not really Forever Young's natural style to be fighting it out on the front end, and he still was able to come on again after getting shuffled back to the quarter pole in that race. Since then, he produced what might have been the best dirt performance we've seen anywhere this year when he won the Saudi Cup over the excellent turf horse Romantic Warrior, who really did handle the dirt that day in Saudi Arabia. That's a race that got a huge time form rating. However you look at, international ratings, it was well thought of. And if you have seen anybody who makes speed figures try to make speed figures for that Saudi Cup card, it was a number that was through the roof. So Forever Young is still as good as a 4-year-old. I know his Dubai World Cup was disappointing. You might remember his trainer went on Twitter and put out this diatribe about how the excuses that this horse had before that race, the testing barn, him having a fit, whatever. I'm not going to worry about it too much. He got in a perfect prep last time. He's a horse that gets the distance. And I think with the way this race is going to shape up now, with the Rabbit going out to the front, with Fierceness probably stalking, and Forever Young being outside of him, I think he's going to get his preferred stalking trip in this race.
Brad, what I thought was interesting is when you're looking at this race, seeing how much things have changed in horse racing, because there was only one horse in the entire field that raced in the month of October. Everybody else had raced in September. In fact, 7 of the field last raced in August. And we're seeing horses come into these races now off longer and longer layoffs like we didn't. So many of these horses passed their final round of preps. And then you have a horse like Mindframe, who really hasn't even finished a race since the end of June. And it's, for me, he's one of the more talented horses in the field, but that's a long time between races when you're going to be facing the top horses in the world on the dirt.
Yeah, it is. And, prep races, maybe they're just a thing of the past, because these trainers, they know how to train horses up to a big race. And once your horse is qualified to make it into the Breeders' Cup Classic, the last thing you want them to do is to maybe be exposed in some race that is meaningless. So a lot of guys, and many of them this year in the Breeders' Cup Classic, have elected to forsake the final prep race, let somebody else win those. We're going to go in fresh. Sierra Leone went into the Breeders' Cup Classic fresh last year off a 10-week layoff. He did just fine. So I don't mind that from a handicapping perspective. I'd love to see horses run more often, but from a handicapping perspective, the lack of a recent prep is kind of a non-issue, at least for me.
We haven't talked a whole lot about journalism. So, David, we found out a few weeks ago that they were going to have a rider switch now, and that Jose Ortiz will be jumping aboard journalism for the first time. What do you think about that change? And what do you think about journalism's chances in the Breeders' Cup Classic?
Yeah, we got a commenter. Don't worry, we're not going to leave out journalism. I know he's a very popular horse. Look, you got to give it up to this horse's connections. They really asked a lot of him earlier in the year, running through all 3 Triple Crown races, and he stood up to it really well. But Brad, I've heard the argument made recently that maybe what you see here in the PPs, this layoff line after his last race, is going to be the big difference maker in how he performed in the Pacific Classic versus how he performs in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Because remember, the last time that he had a layoff line in his PPs, it's when he got freshened up for the San Felipe and produced arguably the best effort of his career, beating a horse in Barnes, who was thought of as the Derby favorite at the time. I don't know if I quite buy into it, but this might be a horse that could benefit from a freshening. Yeah,
I mean, I saw the same thing as you, David. His best career best win was off a layoff. He's coming in off a similar layoff. I don't know. I like 3-year-olds that have that continue to develop. To me, journalism, he got to his level. He hasn't taken the next step forward. And I think he needs to take another step forward. Well, he certainly does, because Fierceness was a decisive winner over journalism last time. So I wonder if journalism's career has plateaued. If it has, it's been an outstanding run. You don't see horses running all 3 legs of the Triple Crown like journalism has, and he shows up every single time. And I know that Reese Bowie, his former jockey, has been under a lot of criticism. Some of it, I think, is misguided, because I think that journalism kind of he runs to his own program. If he wants to drop out, he'll do that. He doesn't always follow jockeys' cues, and I don't think that it was always Reese Bowie's fault. Sometimes it was, like in the Santa Anita Derby, which he won anyway. But I think that the jockey switch, a lot of people are saying it was maybe overdue, but I wonder if journalism has maybe already peaked and we've seen the best of him. Not sure yet.
David, put some final touches on the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah, we cover most of the major players. I mean, Todd Pletcher obviously has a strong hand in this race. You brought up Mindframe. He's a wild card. Antiquarian is a horse that probably shouldn't go unmentioned. He did run his best race last time in the Jockey Club, though he was the only horse that was unaffected by that much discussed trouble at the start. So I kind of need to see it again from him. But as you were getting at earlier, Gino, it's still a really competitive race. And I feel like it is still the main attraction on Saturday's card.
And I know as we turn the page, Mike Welsh was very high on journalism in the mornings when you'd listen to him in the Clocker Reports. And if you read the Clocker Reports, and I think we have a graphic for the Clocker Reports you can purchase for Friday and for Saturday. They are both up and available right now. These will really help you out with horses that you are on the fence about. Maybe you weren't sure, and that workout might push you over the edge to wanting to use them. So check out the Breeders' Cup packages, Clocker Reports, betting strategies, everything you need. Use that QR code. It'll take you right to shop.drf.com. We move to the final three races on Breeders' Cup Saturday. First up, it's the Breeders' Cup Mile, this one on the turf. And in the Breeders' Cup Mile, David, why don't you take the lead? We'll have the runner-up from last year, Johannes, coming back, but he's had a kind of a strange year coming into this race.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the last year's Breeders' Cup Mile is a logical starting point for this race. Johannes ran really well last year. He was very sharp last year. He had a full campaign last year. That's not been the case this year. He had an issue early in the season. He was off for a long time. His return in the 4-star Dave was almost a non-race because it was over right from the start. Not to pick on Rispoli too much after just talking about it, when he take off journalism, but that was not one of his finest rides. Look, Johannes got back on track last time. I think this is a deeper Breeders' Cup Mile than it was last year. So I didn't want to just rely on the form from last year. And look, we also have the favorite in last year's race, Notable Speech, back in here. And he's a horse that is a contender once again. It looked like he had kind of gone off form earlier this season. He's brought it back around coming into the fall. His race in France, 2-back, was very good. Probably should have won. I didn't think he beat a good field in the Woodbine Mile last time, so I think he might be an underlay in here. I was interested in some other Euros, but it is one of the more competitive races on the Saturday card.
Brad, a lot of these races this year, we have top contenders from last year coming back, right? Same thing in here. Second and third place finishers, two of the top contenders from last year. Last year's favorite, Notable Speech, was very impressive in the Woodbine Mile. How do you see this race playing out?
Our familiarity with some of these horses doesn't make it any easier to analyze, especially in the case of Johannes, because as David said, he had a campaign last year going into the Breeders' Cup Mile. He had a foundation of races. That's not the case this year. He had a definite excuse in the 4-star Dave this summer. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Then he came back in the City of Hope Mile. He almost had to win that race. It was not a great field. Listen, the runner-up Cabo Spirit is a good, solid, hard-knocking horse, but he is not a world-class turf horse. So Johannes pretty much had to win that race. So the question now becomes, is Johannes as good in 2025 as he was in 24? I don't think there's any way to answer that. And because everybody knows who he is, I think that he's going to get bet accordingly. I'm not so sure that he is the same horse. Not sure he's not. Notable Speech, he got back on track, but he beat a horrible field in the Woodbine Mile. He was 2-5, and he did what he had to do. But there wasn't much behind him that day. I'm going with another improving 3-year-old from Europe. It's a grass race. You know that Europeans always win the grass races at the Breeders' Cup. Number 3, Solon, whose early season losses he had a number of excuses. He had a whole bunch of trouble back in June on May 11th. He was sick coming out of his June 28th race, and then he got his act together, scored a grade 3 win, and then last time out beat Older in a Group 1 in France. This is a horse that's won 3 out of 6 back-to-back wins. A 3-year-old getting good in fall. How much more improvement does he have in him? I don't know that he needs a whole lot more, but if he does move forward one more time, I think that he's a solid gamble at odds of 6-1. So I'm taking the 3-year-old Salon over number 2, Notable Speech. And back to Johannes, I just don't know what to do with him. My gut feeling is to take a stand against him, but that could be flat wrong.
David, I was going to come in here with like 2 or 3 horses that I had been watching in the mornings that I thought were training really well, that I upgraded. And then earlier today, our colleague Marcus Hirsch stole some of my material. He posted in a tweet, I finally got an uninterrupted chance this morning to watch a lot of the Breeders' Cup horses training. Number 1 rated repositive visual impression, Salon, who he just mentioned. That was a horse who I kind of felt the same way about, just really upgraded based on visual. And I'm not a clocker. So when I see someone like Marcus also agree, I'm like, okay, it makes me feel a little bit good. So hopefully we were looking at the same thing there. David, if you want to give a thought on that one and any others you have in the mile.
Yeah, I'm starting to think I might have been a little bit too high with this morning line, and it's 6-1 on Salon in this race because it does make a whole lot of sense in here as the improving horse coming off a Group 1 win. It just feels like he's coming together at the right time. He's the now horse of the Euros in this race. So I'm not against him by any means. I put another horse on top, but he's a horse I definitely have in the mix. But I think it's natural to transition to talk about the horse that was right with him in that Prix du Moulin 2 back at Longchamp, the Lion in Winter going out for Aidan O'Brien. I didn't think he ran discernibly worse than Salon in that race. The race was sort of coming apart at the end. He moved early. He didn't go down without a fight. It was a blanket finish. I thought he was pretty game. He's a horse who was definitely turned into a miler after they tried to make him stretch out early in his career. And then he came back to solidify that improved form with another Group 1 placing last time in the Queen Elizabeth just 2 weeks ago. So he's coming back on relatively short rest. We've seen Aidan O'Brien do this before, make a split-second decision after a race to target another race on short rest. So I'm not too worried about that for the Lion in Winter. And Gino, the key point I want to make about him, and also the other horse that I like in this race that I think we'll get to in just a second, is that when you go through the pace scenario of this mile, there is very little speed in here. I would say there's close to zero speed in here. There are no front runners in the race. Maybe you could make the case that the number 13 Kirat could go, but he only went to the front end in one race where he wired it at 150-1 in Europe. He's not even a natural front runner. So the Lion in Winter, I prefer him to Salon only because when you watch the European races, he's the one that has the tactical speed. He can be forward in this race. So of the Euros, I think he's going to get the best trip. We'll see if he's good enough and if he can take that step forward. But there is one American horse, that I project to get a pretty good trip in this race.
Okay. One American horse that I'm a little curious about because he's one of those tweeners when it comes to distance is Program Trading. Program Trading is a horse who doesn't really want to go 1.5 miles. That's too far for him. A mile, he can get the distance. He came running and was second in the turf mile last time out, but he's probably better at about 1.1 miles, like something in that range. David, do you give this horse a chance as one of the Americans in here? He's never really run a bad race. He's always showed up and he always fires with pretty good performances, but is he at this level?
No, I mean, look, he was the top 3-year-old turf horse going back to 2023, and he's obviously had issues. He's been hard to keep on the racetrack since then. It feels like Chad Brown's got him back in pretty good form, but I'm pulling up the replay of the Coolmore Turf Mile, a key prep race for this last time. And I don't know, Gino, when I watched this race, I had trouble making enough of an excuse for Program Trading to turn the tables on the winner, Rhetorical, who, when you watch these horses come to the wire, it looked to me like they were never getting by Rhetorical. And this is a horse, a New York bred, who I'm very familiar with, having competed in New York State a lot, who has just ascended through the ranks quicker than you really have ever seen a horse like this. I mean, he was competing against nobodies going back to earlier this year, but they have asked big class tests of this horse every single time, and he's passed them with flying colors, did so against Grade 1 Company last time, and crucially, he's got the gate speed and the tactical speed to get forward in this race. He could even make the lead in this race. And I just think the way it sets up, it's going to make him really tough to pass because not only does he have that tactical speed, he's a very strong finisher.
David's tipping that one. And for Brad, we talked about Salon, who's that up-and-coming 3-year-old coming off a very impressive Group 1 win last time out. 2 more races to go as we turn the page from the mile to the dirt mile. And another instance where we have last year's winner coming back in this race, Full Serrano, who won the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile last year. He was off for most of this year, showed back up in September, Brad, at Del Mar, and won a very easy race. It was a prep race. He was a heavy favorite. It was basically just a paid workout for him. They tried to go a little longer in the Goodwood, and it just seemed like he didn't want to go the 1.1 miles. He really does look like a mile horse, or maybe even a little shorter than that. Nevada Beach is definitely a distance horse who ran him down that day. What do you think about him from a starting point in this race? Do you give Full Serrano another shot to win this thing 2 years in a row?
Absolutely. Give him a huge chance. And he's had a terrific campaign so far. Like you said, his comeback was basically a workout. And yeah, he couldn't get 1 1/8 miles last time out, but maybe he got beat by a very good horse. Nevada Beach is no slouch. He's a very good horse. And that was just a means to an end for Full Serrano. His campaign wasn't focused on winning the Goodwood. His campaign was focused on trying to repeat in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. I talked to his connections right after he finished second in that race. And I know he was the 1-2 favorite. And yes, they were disappointed that he did not win. but it was a stepping stone toward what he's going to do this Saturday. Bull Serrano has tactical speed. I don't think he needs the lead. He is a huge player, but he's only my second selection because number 3, Nisos, he could be special. He doesn't run very often. I think he's almost too fast for his own good. He runs in a race and then he falls apart. Something goes wrong. There's his whole career, his 6-start career has been filled with layoff lines. Early in his 3-year-old campaign, he was scratched out of a stake race and disappeared for about a year. He scratched from the Pacific Classic this summer to point to the Goodwood. He didn't make the Goodwood. So this is his first start since late July, talking about Nisos. I still think he is a brilliant racehorse. He's arguably the best horse in the field. I think that this race is all about Nisos. I'm not interested in betting him at 8-5, but I am interested in watching him from a sporting perspective because he is a very special racehorse.
David, we thought a couple months ago we were going to get a showdown with Nisos, with fierceness, and with journalism all in the Pacific Classic. Leading into the race, Nisos had to scratch, and we never got a chance to see Nisos try to go the 1.25 miles. He missed a couple workouts, so they wanted to point him to the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. They were talking either Dirt Mile or Sprint, ended up going with the Dirt Mile here. I mean, he would have been a top contender in the classic division if he were to show up in there. And as Brad was pointing out, he's one of those horses who's so talented. Reminds me of like basketball player, Brad, of like Derrick Rose, the guys who are so good. They're so talented that they can't so fast. They can't keep it together at all points. David, what do we do with Nisos in here?
Look, I think you've got to be a little concerned about the preparation for this race. Yeah, we know that Baffert can get a horse ready off workouts, but it wasn't the initial plan. As you said, he missed the Pacific Classic. Right after that, Baffert was like, maybe I'll run him back in the Goodwood. Couldn't make that race either, didn't work in time. So this is not the way that they wanted to come into the Breeders' Cup. And, I'll just make one point about Nisos, and I'm taking a shot against him here, and I admit he could win this race by 5 lengths, and I'll be wrong. I'll be happy to lose. I'll be a short price. But he is a horse who has shown a lot of talent around one turn. I thought maybe one of the most impressive races he ran in his career was when he was right there at the end of the Churchill Downs, coming off that very long layoff, hanging with some of the best milers and sprinters in the country at that point in time. But in his two-turn races, let's be honest, he's faced nobody. That Robert B. Lewis field, yeah, he was visually impressive. There was nothing behind him. In the San Diego, that field was awful behind him. So I'm not so sure that Nisos is quite as formidable around 2 turns as maybe the narrative around him suggests. And also, when you start to look at his campaign this year, he had that really one hard race at Churchill, and he's just been handled with kid gloves since then. Baffert picked out 2 races where he was going to be gigantic favorites. He wasn't proving anything running in those races. They could have embarked on a much more ambitious campaign with this horse, and they just didn't. So I'm a little concerned about Nisos showing up on Saturday. And that's reason enough for me to take a shot against him in here.
There are 3 former Breeders' Cup winners in this race. You also have a Kentucky Derby winner in this race, too. It is a very strong Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile race. You have Citizen Bull, who won the Juvenile last year. Hasn't really progressed all that much earlier in the year, and then he got a big win in a 3-horse field in the Shared Belief. You've got White Abarrio, who won the Breeders' Cup Classic a few years ago. And David, it's not like he's been running bad as of late. He just hasn't been quite as good as some of the top horses in the division going longer. He's been behind Sierra Leone and Antiquarian, Highland Falls, some of them recently. I believe, did you land on White Abarrio? I think I saw that.
I did. And look, maybe I just looked at a different set of PPs than everybody else because I've told some people I like White Abarrio in this race and they look at me like I've got 4 heads. I don't know. I mean, he's been knocking heads against the best horses in the classic division all year. I mean, I didn't like him in the Whitney or the Jockey Gold Cup. Those just looked like races that were too tough for him. And guess what? They played out to be too tough for him. But it's not like he was totally disgraced in those races. I mean, he only lost the Whitney by 4 lengths, and he got a really wide trip. He was legitimately 5 wide around the turn in that race, even wider than Fierceness, who some people were using that as an excuse for him when he didn't run well. I mean, he beat Fierceness in that race. He has not run badly, and I know that he won the Classic at 1.25 miles. Personally, I have never thought he was a 1.25 miles horse. He won that Classic like it was a 1 1/8 race, and then he just held on at the end against what was a pretty weak Classic field for that year. I do think he's a miler, and I think he's a miler that could be very effective in a 2-turn mile, something that he never really has had the opportunity to do because he's a 2-turn horse who doesn't really want to go 1.25 miles. I think this is the perfect race for him. Is he as good as he once was? Probably not. But if I'm against Nisos, who else in this race am I supposed to be afraid of?
Any of the younger horses. Is a horse like the other Baffert, goal-oriented, someone that you would take a look to stepping up? Do you think he's good enough to beat this group or compete with a group like this?
Sure, I picked him second of the Baffert horses. He's the one that I would be most likely to bet on. I think the turn back to a mile is going to work pretty well for him too. When you watch his races, he travels really well to the quarter pole. And then when push comes to shove, he doesn't always produce the finish that it looks like he's capable of. Those are the types of horses that usually appreciate turning back. So I think that makes a lot of sense for him. And I mean, the other Baffert Citizen Bull, I think being drawn outside of Full Serrano almost guarantees they've got to hook up early. So I think it's going to make it difficult for him to be successful.
Brad, one thing we don't see very much in racing nowadays is Kentucky Derby winners still running the year after they won the Kentucky Derby. And it's very cool for Mystic Dan. He wins the Kentucky Derby. He goes off form a little bit. There was 5 races in a row where he doesn't get back to the winner's circle, but Ken McPeak did a very good job with him. He got him back to like his peak form throughout this year. And we saw him show up with some really good performances. He's not going to go in the Classic against the tip top horses. Do you think he can compete in the dirt mile?
I do, because I think this is it is a wide open race. I do like Nisos and Full Serrano, as I mentioned earlier, but Mystic Dan is a contender off that win in the Lucas Classic last time out. It got a good number. It was his 5th win of his career. I mean, he's always been a good horse. He got the perfect trip of all time to win the Kentucky Derby. He's just a hard-knocking type of horse, the type of horse that we often see wins the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Full Serrano he kind of fit that category, and a hard-knocking horse from South America who upset the dirt mile last year. That's kind of what Mystic Dan is, like the North American version. He shows up. He's a grade 2-ish caliber type horse, and those are the type horses that win the dirt mile. I completely agree.
David, any final thoughts on the dirt mile before we move to the last?
Nope, I think that's all I got, so we can move on to the Filly and Mare Turf.
And one more time, we want to remind all of you, Breeders' Cup is on Friday and Saturday. We have everything you need at shop.drf.com with the past performances. If that's all you need, we've got you taken care of. But if you're someone who wants some more help with the clocker reports, David and Mike Beer are in charge of the betting strategies coming up this weekend. They'll help.
Actually, Brad's doing the betting strategy.
Brad? It's Brad?
I want to give him a short shrift.
Oh, I didn't okay. That's why you're here, David. So it's David and Brad doing the betting strategy. So we got the 2 gentlemen who you're hearing from here. You could hear even more from them. And what I like about the betting strategies too is it's not just the analysis. It's how are they going to wager on that. If you want a little help there, check out DRF Newbie at newbiedrf.com and pass that around to some of your friends who are going to be hanging out with you this weekend, who might be asking you some questions. If you're a handicapper and you're watching this, you're probably more than a novice, but your friends around may need a little bit of extra help. Check out DRF Newbie. So Brad and David, we finish things off with the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf race number 12. On Saturday at Del Mar, 1 3/8. Hopefully we're all alive for some big exotics, Brad, in this one. Tell us, how did you stack them up with your selections to close it out on Saturday, race number 12?
Well, I remember a year ago, 2024, Del Mar Breeders' Cup, and I was not having a good day and a half. I was somehow able to salvage the entire weekend by more than looks to Full Serrano in the late double. If I'm stuck going into the last 2 races in 2025, I'm just going to have to raise the white flag because I have no idea who's going to win the Filly Mare Turf. I think she feels pretty only because she's a good horse. She shows up every time, but she's breaking from post 13, going 1 3/8. I don't know if she can go that far. I don't know what type of trip she's going to get. How can she possibly save ground from post 13 when you're going around 3 turns at Del Mar? So that's who I picked. To make matters worse, my second selection is number 14, See the Fire. I think it's the first time in history where I've ever picked the number 13 over number 14. See the Fire is a very good racehorse from Europe, Group 1 caliber. She's very good. Look, I don't know who's going to win this race. I hope you guys have something intelligent to offer because I really don't in the last Breeders' Cup race of 2025.
You know, Brad, my mom is someone who plays numbers. She'll play like 1 3 5s and like 2 4s for birthdays. I don't think she's playing a lot of 13 14s, right? I don't know if we have very many numbers players out there who are blindly boxing up the 13 and 14. You don't get many opportunities to play those numbers very often. But David, this is another race where major contenders are drawn way out wide. Both the 2 that Brad mentioned are very live. And if you were just picking out the most likely winners of this race, they would be, probably two of the top three in here, but they could get parked out. Give us your assessment of this race.
Yeah, I was actually considering making them the two favorites in this race, and I felt like I couldn't from those posts. I mean, maybe it's not as much of a deterrent as I thought it was if Brad's still going to go to horses that have trouble winning from those difficult post positions. But look, she feels pretty. She is far and away the best of the American horses in here, not even close. But this is a very tough race for Americans to win. If you look over the history, it's just been European domination for the most part, especially in recent years in this race. And there are some really good Euros that have shipped over for this race. So I think that made it difficult for She Feels Pretty. She's got to try a new distance for the first time. That makes it tough on her. And then drawing this post. I mean, she's a horse who they've been just fine to get wide trips with in the past because she's better than other horses. And I think the connections maybe have it in their heads that she's almost better racing outside of horses. It's really tough to win at Del Mar going 3 wide around 3 turns if that's what they choose to do with her. So for me, I'm against her. She's off all my tickets. If I'm down and out coming into the last race, I'm going to hope and make a score with one of the Euros.
Well, David, what's nice is that you could struggle for most of Friday and Saturday. And if you're fading Nisos and you're fading She Feels Pretty in some of the last races on Saturday, you could still make a ton of money at the end here. Who are some of the horses that you want to use?
I don't have a whole lot to add to what Brad said about See the Fire. I mean, it's pretty obvious on paper. She's got some of the best European form in here. I might have picked her on top if not for the post. I think it's a very difficult position for her as well. So I've got her in the mix, but I can't have full confidence in her. I think the conversation with the two Appleby runners is interesting. Diamond Rain, obviously, showed her class against She Feels Pretty last time at Woodbine. I think she's a horse that looks like she's very suited to that E.P. Taylor course at Woodbine because she's a big, long striding filly who probably just appreciated the more gradual turns of Woodbine and very different kind of course that she'll encounter at Del Mar. The horse right inside of her, Gizora, a horse who had very good form going back to the summer in France. I do think she had a legit excuse in the Arc last time. We'll see what price she is. She drew the best of the European contenders in this race, so maybe that attracts some support her way. I still don't think she's been facing company that's quite as tough as a horse like, say, See the Fire to her outside. So, Gino, that leads me back to the horse that was second in this race last year, Cinderella's Dream. And look, her European form coming into this race is a little bit disappointing because you could see it on paper. She was the favorite in 4 of her last 5 starts, short prices in all of them, and she's lost 3 of the last 4. But let's remember, she's a horse that didn't necessarily look like anything special when she started out in Europe at the beginning of her career. She got really good when they took her to Dubai, ran her on one of those flat courses over there. Then she did nothing in the 1,000 Guineas. They brought her back to a flat American-style course in the U.S. last year, and she reeled off a string of victories, the Belmont Oaks, the Saratoga Oaks, and then arguably should have won last year's Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf when she got into traffic in upper stretch and still almost caught Moira at the end. So maybe it was unreasonable to expect her to suddenly be a Group 1 horse in Europe when she never was before. And, I was listening to some interviews with Charlie Appleby earlier this week, and he said the horse that he's most confident in of all of his runners this week is far and away Cinderella's Dream. William Buick picked her. I think she's awfully dangerous in this race, and she might not be the favorite this year.
Brad, do you have anything else you want to mention on this one?
Oh, I mean, that's a very interesting comment from Appleby. Trainers sometimes do tend to overstate their horses' health and or chances, but when a top guy like Appleby gives you a nod on a horse, you kind of have to take it at face value. So very interesting tout on Cinderella's Dream. She'll be on my tickets as well.
And saw this mentioned as one horse that I would upgrade just based on in the mornings too. This was on that list of like 3 to 5 for me. I don't know if she's classy enough to win a race like this, but if you're looking for some big prices underneath, very, very honest, Miguel Clement has her in really good form right now. And she's looked very good out on the track. And when she's schooling in the paddock there, that's Beleza. But another one who's drawn towards the outside, not going to have some easy trips for some of these runners in here. So as we wrap up, David, I'll ask you if you can give us maybe 2 or 3 horses that you're interested in over the couple days. And Brad, same for you. If you can give us maybe 2 or 3 horses that are on your radar over the few days. First, though, we want to thank the sponsors of this show. And if you want to find out more about them, you can check them out on the website, morningline.io. Own the game there with morningline.io. And a big thank you to the Breeders' Cup as they were streaming this live on the Breeders' Cup YouTube and social medias as well. So we had a few extra people out there watching us today and chiming in with some comments. We hope all of you have a fantastic Friday and Saturday. And remember, anything you need, you can go to shop.drf.com or the Daily Racing Forum YouTube, where we have individual previews of races. We have wagering strategy videos. Brad went in with some of his selections. We had Marcus Hirsch and Steve Anderson talking about international runners. We had 2-day double wagers, everything you could hope for, all on the Daily Racing Forum YouTube. So Brad, we'll start with you. A couple horses that you want to mention over the weekend. Oh, there we go.
Can you repeat that, Gino?
Yeah, Brad, any 2 or 3 maybe horses you want to mention over the weekend that you like, that you want to as your best bets?
Yeah. On Friday in the juvenile, race number 9, I like Intrepido to spring an upset over some of the well-fancied runners. On Saturday, I like the favorite, Ben Tornado, in the sprint. That's race number 6. And in the mile, race number 10, I like Salon. Intrepido, Ben Tornado, and Salon, my 3 top choices for Breeders' Cup.
David, before we get to your picks, there was one question that came in about morning lines and you having to redo morning lines. If you want to read this one and if you can respond to it.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I had to redo some lines when the post draw occurred. The Breeders' Cup gave me that option this year, whereas in the past, you wanted to have to set them beforehand. And then obviously with Sovereignty coming out of the Classic, I redid the line for that race. You might have noticed the horse that I cut the most on the line was Sierra Leone. My thought process there was that when people handicapped the Classic with Sovereignty, they would find it difficult to make the case that Sierra Leone was going to outclose Sovereignty if the race came apart. Without Sovereignty in the race, I think Sierra Leone becomes clearly the best closing option. We'll just see if it sets up for him.
And then David, give us a couple horses that are on your radar for some best bets this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, on Friday and Saturday, I'll go to both of the turf sprints. In the juvenile turf sprint, I think Royal Testament's going to work out a really good trip, getting a rider upgrade to Flavian Pratt, and she probably will be double-digit odds in there. And in the turf sprint for the older horses on Saturday, I think Reef Runner's going to get a really good trip once again, and he's a 5-furlong turf specialist, like we talked about earlier. And then one more on Saturday in the Classic. I'm a big fan of Forever Young. I'm hoping to see him go out and finally get the victory in the U.S.
So some best bets from Brad, some best bets from David. On Friday, for me, I've been waiting for La Wally to maybe get the trip that she could get and maybe the setup she could get in the juvenile filly. So we'll be looking at her on Friday. And then when we flip the page to Saturday, 2 that were on my radar, Rishi in the filly and mare sprint. I think she could sit a really nice trip from the outside. I think she will be in that race to try to win the race. And at a bit of a price, the number 2 Banishing in the sprint is a horse who I definitely want to have because I could see him coming from off the pace and lighting up the board there at a very fair price. David, Brad, I feel privileged to be sitting down to 2 extremely talented, sharp handicappers like the both of you. I feel like I got the call up to the big leagues today. They brought me up from the minors, and I'm here sitting with 2 of the greats. So, Brad, thanks again for your time, and we wish you the best of luck this weekend.
I hope you still feel that way on Saturday evening, Gino. Thank you very much.
David, always a pleasure talking with you. I always learn something that I hadn't been, it wasn't on my radar, and wish you the best of luck this weekend.
Same to you, Gino. You did all the hard work tonight leading us through this. So thanks. And I always appreciate your enthusiasm for these big days.
And thanks to all of you for the comments. We love hearing from you. Good luck this weekend, Breeders' Cup Friday and Saturday.
Think horse racing is too complicated? Think again.
And they're off.
Every pro was a newbie once. Meet DRF Newbie, the mobile tool loaded with daily racing form data and the power of DRF AI.
What a shocker.
Get the insights you need fast so you can play smarter and feel more confident. DRF Newbie, horse racing made simple. Try it free today. Visit newbie.drf.com.